Welcome back to Balanced, where each episode, Steve and I discuss a philosophical topic and try to use common sense, reason, and logic to find a way forward.
Looking at episode 19 here, and what I have called it when I filled this out here is near-death experiences, soul or science. Interesting topic to say the least. First things first, I'm going to ask you this. Do you even just right off the bat believe in near-death experiences?
Well, let me answer your question with a question. For the purposes of this discussion, when we say near-death experience, are we talking about a situation where you face down some danger, or your life is endangered and you almost die? Or are we talking about what I think of normally when I hear near-death experience is an out-of-body experience where something goes wrong during a surgery, or you're in an accident and you experience something that feels out of body? And I'm curious, like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, no. I think that's a great question, and really the latter is what we're talking about. Let's say someone it comes to a point, like you said, accident in some surgery, or maybe it's like a health condition. Someone has a heart attack or something like that, and they're sort of in those first steps of unconsciousness and dying, and then are somehow brought back, whether it's they're resuscitated or whether they just almost died and came back, and it's sort of an out of body thing. Now it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've recently been talking to someone in emergency management, and they were talking about your life flashing before your eyes. And this person told me that science is saying that it's almost like when people have that experience, which is not what we're talking about here, but I just think it's interesting to throw it in,
Mm-hmm.
is when people have that experience, and your life is flashing before your eyes, all these memories. This person said that there's some studies that actually show that you're in a situation that you've never been in before, and your brain is sort of cataloging through like a Rolodex, going through like, okay, what have we been through similar to this that helped us in the past? Can we use it
Yes.
here?
Yes.
And so that's what really that is. So when people say my life was flashing before my eyes, having all these memories and all these things, that's actually a thing. So
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But we're talking about that sort of outer body, like, so people who believe certain things are like, hey, this is like, your soul sort of starting to leave, um
Yeah.
and then somehow, for whatever reason, it comes back, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I'm glad that we cleared that up. It's certainly an important distinction for this conversation. And then back to your question, do I believe in near-death experiences? I certainly believe that the death process could have any number of effects on our consciousness and our mind, and how we experience or interpret those is, you certainly could have an experience that feels, like people talk about, like, well, I died on the table and I was being pulled towards the light and then I was resuscitated. Or, people who claim that they actually died and went to another place and saw loved ones who had passed before them before they were brought back. Do I believe that they're actually crossing over into the next realm before being pulled back? No, I personally don't believe that. I think that the neuroscience would tell us that it's just how we experience the shutting down of systems. Another example is there's a boy whose parents wrote a book about him, claiming that he believes, and they believe, that he was actually a World War II fighter pilot who died in a plane crash in the
yes.
Pacific, and then he was reincarnated, but he retains memories of his prior life. Do I believe that? No, absolutely not. There is no evidentiary basis for that whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had watched part of a series on I believe it was Netflix, and I think it's called Surviving Death. And they did have like a 30-minute episode about that boy and his family. So
What's interesting about that case, and I'm not super familiar with it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but
mhm.
I just I seem to remember this, and I remember it being quite coincidental. Are the parents not hyper religious?
You know what? I don't think they talked too much about that. The parents were talking about all the research they did and talking to this kid, and he was like mentioning names of different ships, and they do the research to say this ship was back
Yeah,
in World War II. Like, so
yeah,
he's coming up with some names, and that's really, I don't remember the episode them really basing it on, um, they're thinking more about reincarnation than basing it on like religion or
yeah.
anything like that.
I
So,
gotcha. Well, at the risk of sounding as if I'm coming at this with a closed mind, let me also say that while I don't believe that that child is a reincarnated World War II fighter pilot, I do acknowledge that the entire universe is comprised of energy, and that energy is interconnected in ways that we don't understand. Does that mean that kid actually has some fragments of memories of another life that were lived? I don't necessarily believe that either, but I did just want to say that I do recognize and accept the interconnectedness of the life force, so to speak.
okay. So, yeah. And as far as me, near death experiences, the ones we're talking about here, do I believe? I mean, it's interesting because in doing research for this, I can't say that it's impossible at this point. So is this me just being on the edge and not wanting to commit? Probably so. But I don't think I can. I just I can't say it's impossible right now.
Yeah, that's
So
fair.
so why this topic? I read about a near death experience case, and it really piqued my interest. And we're going to talk about it, and it's really probably the most famous. And I'll explain why when we talk about it. But really, um, uh, plus, if these near death experiences are something that do indicate there's some sort of leaving the body or something. I mean, obviously, we're all going to eventually go through that. So that's interesting in and of itself, just to
Sure.
to think about the possibilities. So
Yes, the existential aspect of it.
so anything extra on this topic for you, like that really piques your interest, or
Well, of course, I think like just through the lens of my own skepticism, I think it's an interesting topic. And to your previous point, like even if we can't uh, prove that it's not possible, this is one of those things that I think the burden of proof would be on. It's not for us to prove that it's not possible. It's for the people who make these claims to demonstrate somehow that it is, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does. It does. It makes sense. So they really, have to prove it. So, like, show me, right? So I'm going to talk about this case, and anyone who's into and has studied and read about near-death experiences is going to roll their eyes and say, "Oh, we're talking about Pam Reynolds Lowry." This is the most famous case of this, and I'll explain why. Now, she was born in 1956. Passed away in 2010. Getting most of this basic information here from wikipedia.org. A lot of links in there to other articles and things as well. So she was an American singer-songwriter from Atlanta, Georgia. No one really, really famous, but this is what she did for her living now. In 1991, when she was 35 years old, she stated she had a near-death experience during a brain operation performed by Dr. Robert F. Spetzler, who's a doctor at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, here's the deal. She had some symptoms. She's 35. She's living her life. She's having dizzy spells. She's having moments where she's losing the ability to speak. And then some parts of her body, she's having trouble moving them. So
Hmm.
she's like, what is going on here? Goes to, the doctors, and they eventually go ahead and send her over to Phoenix to Dr. Spetzler. And CAT scan reveals very large aneurysm in her brain right next to the brainstem.
Hmm.
Which I mean, this is a pretty serious thing, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So based on the position of this aneurysm, and an aneurysm sort of like where part of the artery will balloon out and put pressure on other things.
Yeah.
So and there was predicted zero chance of survival in the surgery. The doctor looks at this. He's at this neurological institute. He's an expert, nationwide expert. He's like, yeah, you're not going to survive this. She's like, well, what can I do? And he said, well, I can perform a standstill operation. And here's the deal. This is so, and I'll explain this in a minute. This is so very odd of a surgery that they've got people coming to watch. They're recording everything. They're taking very detailed records about every step of it, because
Mm-hmm.
this is like groundbreaking. Like people are like doctors and students and neurologists are coming from far and wide
Gotcha.
to
Yeah.
say, hey, this thing, if this guy can pull this off, this is incredible. So what is
So,
this?
well, hold on. So, even with a predicted 0% chance of survival, expected survival, they still move forward with the surgery?
Well, here's the thing. That would be for regular surgery, but he said, or we can do a standstill operation. Pam is like, well, what is that? And he explains it. And he's like, otherwise, it's just like you're eventually going to die from this. And she's like, let's go for it. Right. And he explains to her, this is 0% of survival in an average, just let's go in and handle this aneurysm type of surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what happens in this surgery. Um, they put her body into deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. So her body temperature is dropped to 50 degrees. Her blood circulation is stopped for 1 hour. This is a form of carefully managed clinical death in which the heartbeat, the breathing, and all brain activity cease, and blood is drained from the head. No blood in the head.
And you're you're protected from any serious damage by the low temperature.
By the low temperature, yeah. Isn't this
Wow.
sort of reminiscent, sort of, what was that movie that those people were trying to go back to? Remember this in the 90s?
Are you thinking of Demolition Man, where they freeze the prisoners?
No, no, that's interesting too. But thinking of the one with Kiefer Sutherland was in it.
Oh, I
No,
know what you're talking about. They're doing experiments where they're
yeah,
trying to.
they're actually dropping their body temperature and trying to
Right.
see what's after.
I know
So
what you're talking about. Can't remember the name of it.
yeah, can't either. Me neither. Me neither. So listen, all brain activity cease, blood drain from the head. Like, would you go through this? It's do or die, right?
Right. So yeah, I think in that situation, I probably would.
All right, there you go. So now during the surgery, here's what happens. Her eyes were closed and taped shut. Okay. And they put small earplugs with speakers in her ears and taped those down. Now, the speakers are there to emit audible clicks that are used to check brainstem function to ensure complete flat. Now, I'm going to have trouble with this word, electroencephalography.
I think you nailed it. You nailed it.
Indicating a non-responsive brain before starting the operation. So, totally non-responsive brain. This person is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Now the operation is successful. Dr. Spetzler handles the aneurysm, fixes everything, and this woman recovers fully.
Okay.
So talk about
Modern miracle of medicine.
Yeah, incredible, right? So the near-death experience. Here's what Miss Reynolds said. She reported this after waking up, right? She said she heard a sound like a natural D note. Now she's a musician. Okay. She said she was pulled from her body. This is where Ben's eyes start rolling, everybody.
No.
I'm just joking with you.
No.
And she said she floated above the operating room and watched the operation. She said she had very focused vision. Now, a couple things that she reported. She reported seeing a surgical saw that looked like an electric toothbrush. Doctors confirmed the saw they used does look like an electric toothbrush. Okay. So
Okay.
she saw this, and they didn't have any of that stuff, the doctor said, in front of her before she went under in the room. It's like on a tape tray over to the side.
Yep.
Right. She heard conversations between the staff, conversations like, and I think I have it listed here, but one of the nurses, one of the things to drain the blood, they're like draining through a vein in her leg or something, because they have to remove a lot of blood to drain her head, right? And a nurse saying, hey, this artery is just, it's not big enough. And the doctor's like, go move to the other leg. And this did happen. It was recorded as part of, they're recording everything in this operation because this is incredible procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's recorded. And she says she's hearing this conversation, and that conversation happened
Mm-hmm.
after no breathing, no heartbeat, no brain stem function with the audible clicks, right? Pretty special stuff. She said she noticed a presence and was pulled toward a light.
Mm-hmm.
She said she saw her deceased grandmother, uncle, a few other relatives, and then some people she did not know.
Mm-hmm.
She said she felt great, was enjoying being with those people, and wanted to stay, but was told to go back. And her uncle actually, she was like, no. And her uncle actually had to like take her by the arm, sort of like, he's like, come on, go back. And she didn't want to go back into her body. She's back up above her body, and her uncle pushes her. She said it felt like a push. And she said it felt like getting back into her body. It was like jumping into a bath of ice water.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? It sounds incredible. And this is like, so this is just like someone, oh, I saw some light. This is a whole story, right?
Yeah, sure.
From someone who is no heartbeat, no breathing, no
Yeah.
brain activity, no blood even in the head or the brain. The details of the conversation, right? There you have it. I have it here. The female on the operating staff, her arteries are too small. Doctor says use the other side, meaning the other leg.
Mm-hmm.
Pam Reynolds said she heard the song Hotel California playing during the surgery. And the song Hotel California was playing during the surgery.
Okay.
Now, remember, her ears are shut. There's no brain activity. Her eyes are taped.
I'm with you.
She said that she counted 20 doctors in the observation gallery, which, if you've ever seen an observation gallery, it's way up above. Like from the table laying there, you wouldn't be able to see everybody, but maybe you'd see some heads in the front row. But
Mm-hmm.
remember, her eyes are taped shut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Her eyes are taped shut. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's the saw. She said she saw that looked like an electric toothbrush.
Mm-hmm.
Now she thought, man, like what was I hallucinating? She told Dr. Michael Salam, Salom. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Who he reviewed the surgery records, detailed. He hears this, and everything was true. The conversation about the arteries, the saw, the song playing, Hotel California, 20 doctors, everything that she said was true. So, what do you think about that?
Well, there's a couple things. First, I appreciate what you're saying about this case, that she's clinically dead, that they essentially stopped all function, drained all the blood from her head. What I would say to that, and to a lot of what's being described here, well, first of all, let me go back even a little bit earlier. I feel it would be important to have some sense of who Pam was in life before the aneurysm and the surgery. What kind of person was she? Was she skeptical? Was she grounded? Was she religious? Was she someone who believed in mystical things? Was she like a hippie? Did she have crystals? Did she believe in astrology? Because I think that the type of person she was, and her kind of her worldview and the way that she processed information would inform how she would process an experience like this. So that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that information, and that's fine.
Yeah, I understand that, and I would say that there are some books and very detailed people can get in there and read and try to find a little bit more about how she was.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're indicating is like, the type of person who would be very sort of that mystical type of person who would naturally believe in those sorts of things could be the type of person who could fabricate like, I wish, or something like this probably happened in my head, and sort of dream about this type of thing and then think that it's a memory. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yes, it's connected to my next point, which
okay?
is that, regarding the brainstem and lack of activity. Now, obviously, you and I are not medical doctors, but I think we both understand, as I think most people do, that true death, there's no coming back from that. You cannot be turned off, in other words, completely, actually deceased, and then brought back to life. Once you're dead, that's it. I mean,
It
now,
seems like they did it here. No, I mean, no heartbeat, no breathing, no brain activity, no blood even in the brain.
yeah, but that's a very controlled. Now, I guess, like, technically we should talk about like the definition of death and clinical death and what what that all means. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'll just say that I am unconvinced that she actually crossed over into heaven or whatever you want to call it, and that she was actually, that her spirit left her body and was making these observations. I think what is much, much more likely is that, yes, everything is suppressed, everything is slowed. There's very minimal brain activity. Obviously, she's alive. Okay, they have her hooked up to the machine. She's been chilled. I'm not going to pretend to understand the scientific complexities of the procedure. Suffice it to say, the subconscious mind it's almost the way that when you're dreaming, okay, your conscious mind is turned off. In a dream, you're asleep. The conscious mind is turned off. You're at the whim of your subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is very, very good at incorporating external stimuli into the stories that it's weaving, right, while we're asleep or unconscious. True. Or whatever. So for me, I hear this story, and I'm not familiar with this case, but I think like, how could she have heard the conversations between the doctors? How is that possible? How could she have heard Hotel California playing? How could she have known how many doctors were in the observation gallery? How could she have known that they used a saw that looked like an electric toothbrush? Well, I think the subconscious mind is very, very good at, like you said earlier, you flip through a Rolodex, and you're searching for something or looking for something. We've all seen surgeries portrayed on TV, seen movies with scenes that take place in an operation room, and seen the saw. Like, so I think that can inform to a degree. The other thing that I'll say about this is, like, to your point, because this procedure was so unusual, it was so documented. It was observed by many people. There was much written about it. Who's to say that Pam herself at some point didn't have access to those records, that she heard about these elements or perhaps read about these elements and incorporated details into her retelling? Now, I it's not my intention to sit here with you and suggest that she's lying or that she made this up for attention. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the subconscious mind, she wasn't dead on the table. I think like that, I would definitely say if she was dead on the table, she wouldn't have been resuscitated. So clinically, okay, maybe she didn't have, her heart wasn't beating. Like, I get that, but she was still there, like in her mind, if that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying. But and that turns to the question of, okay, if she's still there, but there's no brain activity, what is still there? What is it? And that's what vast majority of people, depending on, in the world, depending on what religion they are, it doesn't matter, believe there's something other than just the brain. Right.
Sure.
So for you to even just say, well, she was still there, but that means she is not her brain activity.
Yes.
And so there's something other that makes up the human being. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. And yes, you're right. There's some stories. I did research and read many accounts of near-death experiences like this that are much more detailed and longer with, I mean, really crazy details. And but why not bring those up? Because this one was so documented. The other ones are you're just taking the person at their word. There was one where a guy was struck by lightning type of deal. And so there's some different ones. But it was that's why this one is the one that people come back to, because they're like, listen, there's all these doctors there. It was controlled. She reported this like right in recovery to a doctor.
Yeah.
So it's not like she had a chance to go read a book about the surgery. Yeah. She's not like 5 years later saying, hey, like, she actually made a complaint. She thought Hotel California, the song, was inappropriate song to be playing during something like this. So
I actually am surprised that in that environment with that many people observing and doing something that groundbreaking, they would have had music playing.
Well, I know sometimes they say, I know they were like, I had shoulder surgery last May, and I know they were playing music there, the doctor and the group. And they had a couple interns there who were like on their summer, because it was just the start of summer.
Yep.
May 18th. And they had music going. They did. So I don't know. You go into a garage where all the mechanics are working, they're playing music too sometimes. So
Sure, sure.
maybe it's the same idea. I'm not sure, but
Relaxing.
yeah, it's interesting. Or just getting in the zone, right? So what's going on here? This case has been cited as well documented and significant with many of the proponents, people who probably, I know what you're going to say, and I agree with you, already believe in this, that there's a soul, considering it to be evidence of the survival of consciousness after death, right? But and like I said, many more cases and reports and interesting stories that people have told, accounts that people have given, but none are so well documented and verified by, yeah, that was true, and according to the records, this song was playing and this and all this stuff. So this is why I was perplexed by this, because I mean, if I'm going to keep an open mind like we try to do here, I'm thinking, and even with what you just said, and I know you're generally a skeptic, even with what you just said, she was still there. She may have been clinically dead, but she was still there. So what is the she, right? That
Right.
begs the question,
It's a
is there a
great
soul?
question, and it's very nuanced, and it makes there's a whole other conversation here, which is that the sense of self that humans experience, the idea that you are a passenger in your own head, kind of driving this body through time, is an illusion. And that's part of what deep meditation is. It's dissolving the illusion that you're you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. And so, but that being said, so if it's an illusion that you're a separate you, and it's just all a function, and it is the result of all of the brain activity and different things that are going on in your brain with all the electricity and all this stuff, all the nerves and everything, all this interaction just sort of creates this illusion of this person. Well, if you're going to make that argument, then when all the brain activity stopped like they had, she was dead. So there would she you couldn't say she was still there.
Right. What I mean by that is that while the activity may have been imperceptible, she wasn't at zero. She was essentially idling
Yeah,
very.
it's almost funny. It's like what this. I know this is a really strange example, but like, what is the exact second when, like, if you lay a steak out on the table because you want it to come to room temperature before you're going to cook it, what is the exact moment at which that steak actually will go bad and
Mhm.
be not good for you to eat? It's like, was she was right before that, right before everything would fizzle out, you know. Um,
But I think that's what the cold temperature does, is it allows, it slows down the throwing of that switch
yeah, yeah, yeah.
such that you can maintain that, like, you're teetering right on the edge for long enough to get the surgery done.
Yeah, it's like they can still restart the engine. Like a mechanic's like, well, we can. There's a point at which we're not going to be able to start it again. But
Right. So put it this way, if they did that exact procedure, everything that they did, but without lowering the body temperature, she's not coming back from it. That is it's the slowing of the processes with the
yeah,
with the with the cold.
okay. No, I hear what you're saying. And for the skeptical part in you, I went ahead and said there's got to be people saying, no, this isn't right. Okay,
I'm very
so
curious to hear what they say.
again, still in Wikipedia, anesthesiologist Gerald Worley, he reviewed the case and he claims, and the claims by Reynolds, and he concluded, hey, her ability to perceive events during her surgery was a result of anesthesia awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so so I looked that up: intraoperative awareness or accidental awareness during general anesthesia. This
Mm-hmm.
is a complication where, and I see you're just like, you're shaking your head up and down saying,
I
yep,
actually am
see.
nodding. I actually am nodding now. Now you're right. Yes.
So this is a complication where patients regain varying levels of consciousness during surgical procedures. So it is possible to have awareness with explicit recall, where patients can remember events related to their surgery.
Well, do you know that we don't even really understand how anesthesia works? We figured out that if you introduce certain substances, you can essentially turn off the conscious mind for a period. Anesthesiologists obviously understand and are very good at chemistry and know how to do that based on your weight, but we don't actually understand the mechanism.
I mean, it's very interesting. I'm not at all an expert on it, but this guy is, that's his job. He reviews it and he said, oh, and so see, this is really easy for anyone who's like not wanting to believe this, or let's just say not about the a soul or anything like that. Anyone who's just not wanting to believe Pam Reynolds' story, they're just like, yeah, it just sounds like bull to me. It
Right.
doesn't. Anyone who's ready is going to jump on this and be like, yep, there it is. Interoperative awareness or accidental awareness during general anesthesia. Patients regain varying levels of consciousness during surgical procedures. It's happened before. It's been documented.
Yeah.
So solved, right?
Well, that may be a little too easy. I mean, what I would say is that the evidence for the fact that she knew how many doctors were in the gallery, the fact that she knew what song was playing, etc., none of that proves that she died and was and had one foot in the
I
next
hear you.
realm. Yeah.
I hear you. Unless you already believe in that, right?
Right.
And just like this anesthesiologist, Worley, if you already believe that, no way you could easily jump on it. Well, there it is. It's done, right? But 20 people in the gallery that high up, the shape of the saw. Remember, her eyes were taped shut, right? See, these are the types of things. The discussion about arteries and the music with earplugs taped into her ears and clicking, and no brain activity, no heartbeat, no breathing, no brain activity. It doesn't, nothing in this adds up to simply be, hey, oh, I believe it's just the soul. Her soul left her body and met her grandmother and uncle and some other people. And then she got pushed back in. Or simply say, oh, but the anesthesiologist guy, he said this thing is it's a documented thing. So that explains it all. I
Yeah.
just don't think you can because of those things.
Yeah.
How high up the gallery was, her eyes taped shut, her earplugs clicking, no heartbeat, no breathing, no brain activity. To be able to, someone would have had to tell her this. Doesn't it seem like it? To be able to give those, the story about meeting people and being pushed back into the body, who knows? But about details, and hey, we change to the other leg with the
Yeah.
artery.
Yeah.
It's almost as if someone would need to tell her this, and
Well,
someone would have to give her, like, we need to put her on a polygraph machine, right? See if you're
yeah.
telling the truth.
I mean, I don't know. I hear a story like this and I think, that I am a man of science. And like so many of the things that you and I talk about on the podcast, the truth is probably, it lies somewhere in between. Just to play the devil's advocate for a second, she must have been told these things. Let's just take the doctor's suggestion that when he was talking about the anesthesia awareness.
Mm-hmm. With explicit recall, he said there are cases with explicit recall where patients remember exactly something that was said or done.
Right.
But in these cases, their eyes aren't taped shut. They've got blood in their brains, right? They've got brain activity. They're just under anesthesia, and their ears aren't plugged up with clickers in them.
I got you.
So
Go to back to that next slide, if you would. So let's just bear the anesthesia awareness in mind and take these things one at a time. There's 20 people in the gallery. They were too high up for her to see, and her eyes were taped shut. How could she know that? Okay. She has earplugs in, and the earplugs produce a clicking noise. Well, a clicking noise isn't like white noise. It's not music. It's clicks. It's not to say that you couldn't hear what's going on around you with occasional clicking. And who's to say that the surgeons, the assistants, the nurses that were at the table at some point didn't mention, oh, we have 20 people observing today. There's 20 people up there. We have 20 people, big group today. And the thing that's just one example of how you can start to see, like, the explanation does not require her soul to leave her body and float up to the ceiling and have a look around. Same thing with the saw. I mean, perhaps the saw sounded to her like an electric toothbrush. That's what she thought of. And the reference is close enough. I don't know. I'm not saying that she didn't die and leave her body and make these observations. Of course, I can't say that. But I am saying that, like, nothing here proves that that's what happened.
I agree. I agree. And but it's just why this is so perplexing to me. This discussion is because, if I'm sitting here thinking, the mind and my concept of self, of me deep inside, that inner conversation and inner feeling of me being a being, it's so tied in my mind to brain activity.
Hmm.
And if there was none, and there's no blood in the brain. See, that's just, to me, I'm like, so if she can hear these, because they're not draining the blood till she's out, right? They're taping her eyes shut and all that. Like, if there's no brain activity, I guess you would have to argue that, well, maybe it's like, the brain activity, all this sort of electric energy in your brain that's all going back and forth through all the neurons and everything. Maybe, yeah, they couldn't read brain activity, but they're here or there, a little spark, something still sort of a low, it's a slow burn way down, almost just about fizzling out, but enough to maybe have some memories and hear some things. I don't know.
I'm with you, man. It is hard to imagine. But I think, again, I think the fact that she recovered from the surgery, that in and of itself, to me, means that, quote, she was still in there
Yeah, but we
all
don't,
along.
but so we're saying we don't know what she is.
Yeah, I mean, her life force. I mean,
Yeah.
her,
Okay.
if because if I think we would agree that resurrection is not, it's not a thing. Once someone is actually dead, and I don't mean clinically dead in a controlled environment on an operating table, hooked up to machines with their blood removed and cold and everything, like conditions perfect. I mean, actually dead. The life force has left your body. That's it. There is no coming back from that. You don't actually cross back over from that place. Now, that's not to say people's heart stops. I understand that the heart can stop. You get it. You get the paddles. You get zapped. You get
Yeah.
your heartbeat back. You know.
But there's still brain activity during that time.
Yes, and
Yeah.
there's one other thing I want to say about this, which is specifically about the light, because that's a recurring thing in many of these stories. Well, I saw a light and I was being pulled towards it. It was very warm. I saw loved ones. For example, when people suffer retinal detachment, that is when their retina starts to pull away from the optic nerve in their eyeball,
Mm-hmm.
the way that people experience that is they see these bright flashes of light. That's what usually brings people to their eye doctor. Say like, hey, I'm getting these weird flashes of light in here. And they look in there and say, oh yeah, the retina is detaching. You have to have, that's how your brain processes that stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
And so who's to say that experience of light isn't the part of your brain that controls sight actually shutting off? And that's what it is that is creating that sense of like, oh man, look at this warm light that's like taking me, it's actually the uncoupling of your mind from the physical world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and it makes me think a little bit about that last episode we talked about that sleep paralysis, where like
Mm-hmm.
your brain now can't move. You're in this strange state, and you're trying to make sense of these feelings you're having.
Right.
And because it just seems like someone's watching you, you get this feeling like, and you can't move, and there's lights and like, so it's interesting. I see what you're saying. But this is just not a simple discussion here, right?
Sure.
When you start thinking about it. So now after all that, what do I thought about it? What do I think about it when I really sort of take through that thought process to where we are now? I'm thinking about the scientific method. You brought up science. I remember last episode when we talked about the NASA report on UAPs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because we don't understand how she could remember certain things accurately, can we deduce that the near-death experience was real, right? That's like saying, well, I don't know what that thing is that I filmed in the sky, so it's probably an alien.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about on the last episode, well, you can't just say that. You have to prove 100% that thing in the sky is not from Earth,
Right. Right.
right? So we'd have to, so would we have to prove 100% that her near-death experience was not intraoperative awareness with explicit recall to believe it? What do you think? We'd have to really prove that, no, we would have to prove it wasn't that condition that the anesthesiologist claimed. And if we could prove that, what would you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you could prove that, I think that would be a big step towards a better understanding or making a more solid connection of like, okay, human beings and probably other living things, we should expect to float up out of our bodies, have it feel like a warm bath, be able to look around, make observations, cross over into the next realm, whatever that is, heaven or whatever, meet loved ones and family members who have passed before you, be welcomed and embraced by them. And yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point, that's the beauty of science, is that like we learn more and more about the world, and then they become, I'll go back to crystals as my example, because I mentioned them before. I know people that put crystals around their home, around their office, and believe that the crystals help direct the flow of energy and can protect them from things or help with certain things. If there was any actual basis for that, evidence-backed basis for that, crystals would be just a part of the normal human. Everyone would know, oh yeah, oh, you're having this issue? Here, put this type of crystal here in your home, and it'll fix that issue. But it's all made up. It's not real.
No, I hear what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. One day, maybe we will, right? Understand what happened. Oh yeah, 100 years from now. Oh, the Pam Reynolds case. Yeah, we figured it out. It was this, and this, right?
Yeah, and maybe at that time, maybe the answer actually is, maybe we will understand. Oh yes, you know what? The science has gotten to the point where we can now say, yes, this universe, this whole realm that we're in, this spectral realm, is temporary, and that's what death is. It's you crossing from this realm to the next, and now we understand it, and that's why you have these cases. That's what a near-death experience actually is. It's a person who is, the conditions are just right, and they actually step over briefly before being pulled back. I'm not saying that's not possible.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Someone starts listening to us, of all people, talking about this. They start thinking, wait a minute, like just some of the things we're saying. People say, I might be able to make a stretch here and say that there's some religion in here. And I would say to this, both of us, I think, came out on stance as not in support of organized religion.
Mm-hmm.
And neither of us said that we understand exactly what is going on and what the world, ends up or happens to us or anything like that, right? So,
and I would go even one step further and say the claim is that we don't know that, and that no one can know that at this point in time.
Yes. And although, belief in some sort of knowledge or something to have created such an incredible, intricate, interconnected world that we live in is, there's arguments to be made for that too, right? But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean you have to go to a building and give someone who doesn't work for a living your money every weekend, right? And listen to him talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, enough said on that. I don't want to go down that road, right? But we've done that episode. So if I'm thinking about final thoughts here, I don't know. At the end of the day, this is not like I could make the Pam Reynolds case, and you're like, oh yeah, oh I get it. You're right. There's a heaven or whatever.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and the other side of the scientific part, the anesthesiologist, what he says, no, that's not rock solid either. So for near death experience to be real, meaning consciousness after death, I think we would need to understand what consciousness is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your mind? Is your mind the result of the brain activity that you have? Is there an actual soul that is responsible for your consciousness? A soul meaning, I'm not talking about in a religious sense, but that some sort of something that is not of the physical that represents you, right?
The passenger
Yeah,
in that lives in your mind and sees the world through your eyes and makes decisions for you. Yes.
yeah. So at the end of the day, from all this discussion, it's an incredible case. There's things to be said on both sides, really well documented. And if we just have to understand what consciousness is, and is there a mind? Is there a soul? What is there? Which
Mm-hmm.
sounds a lot like an idea for an episode of Balanced. What do
Mm-hmm.
you think?
Maybe that's the next one.
You have final thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, just that it's a very thought-provoking topic, and cases like Pam Reynolds' case and the one I mentioned with the kid who thinks that he was a World War II fighter pilot, like they're fascinating and they're curious, and they deserve examination, in my opinion, scientific examination. And I think it's just a good exercise in general for people to, ponder this stuff from time to time. It's existential in nature. And I think that how you feel about it or how you interpret some of these stories can also inform, can help you kind of get to know yourself better and kind of help you understand how you make sense of the world, which I think is its own value.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well said. And I would say also that, there's certain people just in their life who are walking through this world who would hear this and just say, I forget it. I think it's important to discuss things and think about things more than where we're going to get our next cup of coffee and when I need to fill up the gas tank next on my car, right?
Yeah.
Just to actually say, hey, what is this that we're going through this life, and not to just shove it off and let it happen without trying to think about and pondering it, maybe trying to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, Ben, it came to me and I'll probably try to stream it tonight. Flatliners. That's the
That's
movie.
it. That's the one.
That's the movie, right? And they do this several times where people they're bringing them to near death and then bringing them back, right? Pretty interesting concept for that movie. So, like I said, we didn't solve anything there, but I think we took an important step of not bypassing the conversation and really talking about it, and I think making some sort of headway towards an understanding that more discussion needs to be had in terms of what does my sense of self, what is that really comprised of?
Mm-hmm.
So
And even without
mhm.
the answers, it's worth asking the big questions.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So I think we're going to wrap it up today. I would like to thank everybody for listening everywhere they're listening. The United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Taiwan, Italy, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and Romania. We appreciate you listening. If you like what you're hearing, hit follow or subscribe, depending on what platform you're listening on. If you have any ideas for episodes or questions about something that we've said or shared, feel free to email at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com.
Balanced is produced by myself and Steve. Our music is by Four Giants. You can check them out on Bandcamp. And as always, we appreciate you guys listening. This is Ben.
And this is Steve.
And we are balanced.